Um, okay, well, I just lost all my notes, so that's really cool. I'll just make this whole thing up. What I'd like to do is, over the next 30 minutes or so, is just to give you a framework for thinking about what is happening in the media business now and what happens next. The one sentence summary here is that the last 15 to 20 years of media were defined by the disruption of content distribution. I think the next decade is going to be defined by the disruption of content creation. And I will say some of this is a little bit sobering. My own view is that the only way to really manage change is to confront it honestly. I think all of you must agree, or you wouldn't be here on a beautiful Saturday morning. One other thing is that this is kind of a little bit dense, this presentation. I'm gonna have to move pretty quickly. If I can find my notes, that would be helpful. But I'm gonna move pretty quickly. So that is my website there. It's dougshapiro.media. If there's a contact page, if anybody wanted to, if they're interested in the presentation, I'd be happy to send it. And it looks like it's not gonna load. Okay, so here's our agenda. We're going to start with the first disruption, how we got to where we are now. Then we'll talk about this next disruption that is pending. Then we're going to talk about what we don't know, what we do, and what to do about it. This is just a plug for my Substack. That's actually a QR code for a discount. I'll show it again at the end. I write in great depth about all these topics. And then I'm also in the process of writing a book that is due to be published later this year. Okay, so let's start with where we are now. I think to understand how we got to the current point, it's helpful to go back 50 years. Prior to digitization, all signals were analog. Analog signals have no common language. So what that necessitated was you had to have these different silos for media. You need to have different form factors, different supply chains. You read the news in a newspaper, you listened to the radio on the radio, all that sort of stuff, right? And then what happened was the digitization came in, and it created a symbolic layer of representation, a universal language for all media with only two letters, 0 and 1. And what that did was it fundamentally changed the architecture of media and brought down historical silos in distribution. The biggest one is we went from these silos to a unified network. We went from one-way to two-way. We went from local to global. And then the biggest one is that we went from being gated by physical infrastructure to virtual infrastructure, from hardware-based to software-based. And the reason that was the most important is because it changed the economics of the business, that distributing media went from scarce and expensive to functionally free. Right? And so you could draw a straight line from that to what I call the 6 tectonic trends that currently dominate the media business. And I already said this is sobering. This part is not uplifting, so don't expect the uplifting. This isn't like, we're going to try to end on a higher note, but this is not that part yet. Okay, so the first one is stagnation of attention and value. The second one is the disintermediation of the middle, of the traditional intermediaries. The third one is the fragmentation of attention. The fourth one is deflation, by which I mean that there's generally, even if you see Spotify and Netflix raising prices, there's generally pricing pressure across the media business as we've moved from analog to digital. This is Jeff Zucker's thing from 20 years ago or whatever, that we were trading analog dollars for digital dimes. Globalization is kind of a euphemism for the waning power of US content. And then we have concentration, which is a bit of a more complicated one, but it basically has to do with the physics of networks and what happens when so much content is distributed on networks that you have strong things getting stronger, and it results in a concentration of power in a few platforms and attention in a few hits. So that's a lot to take in. What I'm going to do is, just in the interest of time, just talk a little bit more about these top 3, which I think are probably the 3 most important ones. Okay, so stagnation. As you know, the media business is fundamentally about the monetization of attention and engagement. The problem is there's not a lot of attention to go around. And I don't know if you can read that, but the point of this slide or this part of the slide, is that the average US adult is spending about 75% of their waking hours with media today. And what the bottom chart shows you is a time series of this same data. And what you can see here is that it grew with the advent of mobile. We had a new form factor. And then it kind of stabilized, and then we had this COVID bump, but then it's been stagnant since then. So time spent with media is not really growing, and that creates a structural constraint to the growth of the whole media industry. All right, so the second one is disintermediation, and here is the kind of simple version of the historical media value chain. You have creatives, and the bars along the left are meant to show you what each of these different entities do. You have creatives, you have producers, publishers, you have aggregators, distributors, and you have the people who consume. And this is another way to look at it. And the point here is that the most valuable companies, the household names in media historically, have really been middlemen between those who create and those who consume, right? Studios, labels, publishers, video game publishers, cable networks are really, again, the middlemen between who makes and who consumes. And they've extracted so much value in media because they do things that are historically really hard for creatives to do themselves. They put up the money, they assemble talent, they do the marketing, the distribution, the monetization, right? What's happening now is we have this kind of emerging value chain, and if you look at the blue box in the middle, I'm drawing a distinction here between creative and creator, that creators are moving down the stack, that technology is democratizing these different parts of the value chain, of the creation process and monetization process, and it's enabling these people to circumvent the middlemen altogether. And so even in the case where they're not circumventing, even for the creators who are still working with the middle, you could argue that the balance of power is shifting to them. When you hear things about like Ryan Coogler getting the masters back to Sinners after 25 years, what that's indicative, it's more subtle, but it's indicative of the balance of power shifting toward the creatives. Okay, so then we get to fragmentation, and I'll spend a couple more minutes on this one. So fragmentation is happening for a couple reasons that are, one reason I would say that's obvious, and a couple more reasons I'll point out that are not as obvious. So the obvious reason is just an explosion of content, particularly from the creator economy. So what you see here, and that blip you can't see, is Hollywood. And this is my math, but by my math, generously, Hollywood puts out about 15,000 hours a year of new film and TV. There's 300 million hours uploaded to YouTube. So that's 20,000 Hollywoods, okay? It's not as dramatic in music and in gaming, but it's kind of directionally the same thing. You have, volumes as much content coming out of the creator world. A second reason, and what you might push back on that is you would say, well, a lot of that really isn't good. And I would say, yes, empirically, a lot of it is not good because a lot of it doesn't get consumed at all. But it brings me to a second reason, which is less obvious, which is that the consumer definition of quality is also changing right now. And so if you think about, I didn't get an intro, but I used to work at Time Warner. I worked at Time Warner for 12 years. We own HBO. The definition of quality in TV has historically been an HBO show. And it was a word cloud that looked like this. It was, high production value, high budgets, brand name showrunners, recognizable talent, all that sort of stuff. So now we have this emerging definition of quality. And you see that all those same words are on there, because all those things are still important, but now we have new words. We have words like, is it authentic, is it relatable, is it digestible, is it relevant to my sub-community, all that sort of stuff. And for some people, some of the time, this is how they're defining quality. If you think of quality not as some platonic ideal, but actually as revealed preference, what people actually choose to do, then this is how they're defining quality. So if you think about what's happening in media today, all of the growth in video is really YouTube. In the gaming business, you have AAA publishers who are spending, $150, $200, $300 million on cinematic quality graphics. All the growth is actually in blocky graphics on Roblox. And if you think about music, a lot of the growth in music is actually functional music. A lot of it is study music, ambient music. And so really across the media business, most of the growth is in stuff that's not high production value. It's not stuff that you would call high quality. I told you this wasn't uplifting. I warned you, okay. Okay. A third reason is that the social media, the platforms, they hack our biology, right? They create these dopamine loops that addict us. They make consumption completely frictionless. And so what's happening is that when you go and choose a show on Netflix or HBO Max or whatever it's called now, the the you have to make a choice. It's a reflective choice. You have to be reflective. A lot of consumption on social is reflexive. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex altogether. So if you're looking for some kind of quantitative evidence of this fragmentation, this is again my estimate that about a quarter of all video consumption from adults is social video, is YouTube, TikTok, and Reels. If you look in music, what you see is that Spotify puts out these numbers every year of the proportion of music streams that come from the majors versus independents, and the orange part is independents. That goes up every year. In gaming, a decade ago, casual mobile gaming didn't exist. Now it's half of the business. So again, we have this kind of shift in consumption. Okay, so that's consumption. Talking about money, by my math, the whole creator economy, again, the orange thing, is about $300 billion. It's about a little bit more than 15% of the total media entertainment business, but it's growing a lot faster. And even though it's only 15%, it's represented about half of the growth of all media in the last 5 years. So if you kind of take a step back, what I just showed you over the last couple of slides is that the volume of creator content is multiples of professionally produced or corporate media. The consumption's maybe 25, 30-ish%, very roughly, and the money's maybe 15%. There's every reason to think that all of these things are going to go up over time, and so that the creator economy within this envelope of a fixed amount of time and largely fixed amount of value, that the creator economy is going to continue to take share of that. Okay, so just to kind of take a beat here, this is the low background hum of operating in the business today, is that, and just the reality we all live with, is these things. And what's interesting about that is that if you think about the problems in the media industry, if you think about cord cutting, RSNs failing, the strikes, why has box office not returned to pre-COVID levels? Why is WBD for sale? Why did Paramount sell itself? All that sort of stuff. All of those things are a lagging indicator of the last disruption. They're all a lagging indicator of this disruption of distribution. They have nothing to do with AI. And now we have this new thing coming. Okay, so before I mention that digitization created this symbolic layer of representation, a universal way to represent all media, what Gen AI does is it adds a second symbolic layer of meaning, of context and meaning. That's how these models work. They are mathematically representing the relationship between information. They understand context. They understand it's a new semantic layer. And so just as digitization brought down these silos in distribution, Gen AI is going to bring down silos in creation. Things that we think of today as pretty immutable are going to become mutable. I don't even know if that's a word. I don't know if mutable is a word. But if it is, they will become mutable. And what I mean is that we're going to go from human constrained to machine scaled, right? Obviously, no longer gated by humans to the same degree. I think humans will still play a very critical role, as Eric was saying, but not to the same degree. We're going to go from time constrained to real-time creation eventually. Single modality and multimodal. The idea that one concept can be a book or a movie or a TV show or a podcast or whatever. Like right now, I could take one of my essays, I go to Notebook LM, I press a button, it turns it into a video overview, an audio overview, a quiz, a slide deck. That's happening already. Provenance. The line's going to blur between who made something and who consumed something, right? State, the line's going to blur between whether something is locked or not locked. So all these things are going to become more fluid over time, which is really a lot to get your head around, and so let's not. Let's talk about something else, which is the most important thing, again, is going to be the economics. The most important thing is that where we're headed is that content creation is going to go from scarce and expensive to abundant and cheap. All right, so This is another way to put it, is that the internet collapsed the cost to move the bits, and that Gen AI is going to collapse the cost to make the bits. Okay, so what do we not know? A lot of stuff. We don't know a lot of things. We don't know how good is it really going to get. These models keep getting better at a kind of alarming pace, but we don't know where that's going to go. We don't know how much labor it's going to replace. We don't know what is what does a future state workflow look like in production, for instance, right? It's not going to be taking old production workflows and incrementally weaving in AI tools. There's a future state version where people have fundamentally different roles. We don't know what that looks like yet. Is it going to enable enough creative control? Is it going to be accepted by consumers, and for what? Just to give you an example, like I would argue, we've been in this kind of binary world of it's good or it's bad or whatever. But I think we're moving into a world of more nuance, where you start to say, okay, well, it's going to be acceptable for certain sort of applications, but not others. So I would argue, as an example, that anything with an underlying humanity will not be vulnerable or appropriate for Gen AI. I don't think anyone has any interest in watching Gen AI synthetic sports. Like, what is synthetic sports, right? I don't think anyone, like right now, if you look, computers are much better. There's a VC guy named Chris Dixon who makes this point, that computers are much better than humans at chess. But chess is more popular than ever. Nobody wants to watch two computers play chess. I don't think anyone wants to watch, AI's Got Talent. I don't know what a synthetic singing show is, right? Like, that's not a thing. So we don't know what that is yet. We also don't, there's serious legal issues, obviously. There's questions about IP infringement. There's questions about copyrightability, right? Okay, so we don't know a lot of stuff, but there are some things we do know, or about which we can be pretty confident. One thing is that it's, this is all happening quickly, and text is the most technically accessible modality, and so it's already having a big effect here. According to this study, half of all articles online are now written by AI. And if you move through modalities, I just want to show you this quick video about like what's happening in the music business.
Everything in the studio can be emulated in how many seconds?
It's probably about 2.5 minutes. Here's my prompt. Create a square avatar of a fictitious female alternative/indie singer and a name for her.
Wow, Sadie Winters.
It's just going to create the song lyrics. Put my lyrics in.
The lyrics that happen in 4 seconds.
Yes. And then hit create. Let's listen.
This is the world premiere.
I was paper, you were scissors, cut me out.
She's a good singer.
Good singer. Ooh, that's nice. Pretty good.
I played this for a company that I was talking to, and I didn't say this, but someone said, "Oh, it's like Taylor if she could sing." I didn't say it. I'm not. That didn't come from me. It's just my job to propagate these things, not to. Anyway, so the first AI artist has a record contract. Zanya Monet has a $3 million record deal. And Deezer, which is a DSP in France, did a study recently with consumers, and 97% of them could not tell the difference between AI created and human created music. So it's happening fast in music. A video is the most technically demanding modality. This is already out of date because it doesn't have Seed Dance 2 or Kling 3 on it, but this is moving super fast. And I know you've all seen this. I'll just play it for a second. This kind of canonical, very disturbing, surreal Will Smith thing. It's worth watching every now and again.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
This doesn't seem like it's a big threat to the TV business. I don't know about you.
Fresh pasta of Bel Air.
Okay, so that was April 2023. If you have not watched this, I'm just going to play a quick clip from this Star Wars fan film called Beggar's Canyon. Again, that was April 2023, and now here we are. This was less than 3 years later, and just take a look at this. It is not perfect, but let me just play it.
We're lucky Jawas don't like to read. was a place where the most powerful kyber crystals were protected. Kyber crystals are what power lightsabers, and they aren't easy to come by. This is a map right to one. I know.
So this is one guy who apparently lives in Oakland who made this thing, and he's now had two installments of it. So it's to me that was pretty startling, and I posted that online, and a bunch of people said, well, this isn't real filmmaking, or they had things to nitpick. A 9 out of 10 were, this is better than anything I've seen from Disney. I haven't felt like this since 1976. So anyway, I think animation here is the canary in the coal mine. Well, another thing we know is this is going to bring down costs, and what this is showing you is a comparison of the time and cost structure between this movie called Where the Robots Grow, which billed itself as the first AI-enabled feature-length animated picture. And you can see here, relative to Inside Out 2, it took, Jeff Katzenberg said a couple years ago that the cost of animation was going to fall 90%. He was actually wrong. It's more like 99%. And just to kind of go back to the title of the slide, this is a kind of a provocative, I think, but important point, is that Gen AI does not need to enable comparable quality. It just needs to compete for time. And that's why I'm saying here is if it can enable 80% of the quality at 10% of the cost, it's going to be disruptive. We know it could happen a lot faster. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this, and you can read if you want to later. But the point is that this is happening very quickly. This is happening at software speed, not backhoe speed. You're not moving Earth and putting in cables and satellites and stuff. Okay, so we also know it's going to enable new stuff. Most of the time when we talk about Gen AI, we talk about it as a cheaper way to do what we already do. I actually think the killer application is going to be new things. And so there's this concept in media called skeuomorphism, which is that when there's a new medium, typically the first thing it does is it's an imitation of the last medium, right? So the first time you read a magazine online, it was a static PDF. The first films were basically recorded stage plays. And then, think about now when you read a magazine online, there's hypertext links and infinite scroll and embedded video and all that sort of stuff. And so that will happen here too. We're talking about Gen AI in a very skeuomorphic way. We don't know what the neumorphic applications are going to be. What happens is that the creatives figure out the unique attributes of the medium and figure out how to do new stuff with it. And so there are unique attributes of Gen AI. It's going to be very cheap and fast. It's going, you have this concept of multimodality I mentioned. You have the concept of real time I mentioned. The idea that everything is inherently three-dimensional. Every viewer is inherently the cinematographer. You think about the idea that's unconstrained by physics. And so it's going to enable, you say, okay, what's that going to do? It's going to enable new stuff, whether that's emergent or personalized or interactive or fan creation or multimodal or whatever. The truth is we don't quite know. And my example of something that we don't quite know always is ASMR. Like, I don't understand that there's this guy, Zach Choi, he's got 35 million subscribers, he eats cookies. I still don't understand what that is. And so you can't predict what this is going to be, but the point is there will be new things, and those will also compete for time. Okay, so where does that leave us over the next 5 to 10 years? Into this place. Again, I'm trying to provide, I think, an unvarnished view, which is that the production costs are going to compress along the whole curve. When I mean the whole curve, I mean everything from high quality to low quality. The costs are going to come down. You will have what's going to be effectively an infinite amount of content. We're going to have downward pressure on content pricing. That's just those two things combined is page 4 of your Econ 101 textbook. More supply, pricing goes down. You're going to have this prevalence of this AI intermediary layer, which we didn't talk about and won't have time to. I think you're going to continue to have the shifting definition of quality. It's going to be more dynamic than executives like to think. And I also worked at Time Warner for 12 years, and that was one thing that I noticed is that the executives there get very anchored into a view of what quality means. And we're going to have these new fluid forms of media, right? Okay, so what do you do about it? Oh, well, I say, what does that mean? It means more cowbell. It means that all the things I told you before, it's only going to exacerbate that. Okay, so let's get to the, okay, great, what do we do? I think this becomes the critical organizing question. if you're trying to figure out what to do, this is it. Like, what's going to become more valuable when content approaches free? That's the key question I think you got to just keep asking yourself. And we're not going to know the answers today. I think it's going to evolve over time. But the way that I think about it is that when you have these disruptions, value tends to move in 4 directions. Challengers, which are basically disruptors, but I'm trying to be alliterative here. So challengers, consumers, end up benefiting in terms of more choice for less money. And then these last 2, complements and choke points. And those are the ones that I think are important, and I'll talk about. So by complements, what I mean is things that get more valuable when something else becomes more abundant and cheaper. And this happens all the time. I have a bunch of examples here. You think about like, digital photography, when the cost of photography went to 0, as it did when you went from analog to digital, then the value shifted into the complements, things like storage and editing software and social networks. So this happens all the time. This is not a media-specific thing. Within media, you're already seeing this happen. You're seeing this happen in the media where the cost of creation is already low. So in music, for instance, you've had this shift of value from recorded music to concerts, right? It used to be that you go on tour to promote the album. Now you put out the album to promote the tour, right? You think about what's happening in gaming. In gaming, people used to pay for gameplay. They'd buy cartridges for, $60, $70, and now in mobile gaming, the cost of creation is compressed, and so all games are free to play. Games are free, and then what gets monetized is a complement, status, skins, emotes, power-ups, communities, or whatever. And you're seeing this in the creator economy too, that the biggest creators are making more money off platform than on platform. So I don't know if you know Mark Rober, big creator, does kind of kids-oriented stuff. He makes apparently a $2 or $3 million from YouTube every year, but he makes about $30 million supposedly from selling subscription toys, his business Crunch Labs. So what we have is this, I don't even have that slide, but you have the concept that that all content is going to become top of funnel to other stuff, and that you're going to, and I wish I had brought that slide, but I did not. Anyway, so when we talk about complements, I don't have time to read through these, but you have, this is an idea of thinking about, again, what new businesses, what new problems emerge, what new businesses emerge as content becomes cheaper and cheaper. So you have abundance-driven complements, meaning things to help consumers manage the tsunami of stuff. You have creator-driven complements to services for creators. You have fan-driven complements, things that fans would pay more for. You have new possibilities, and you have new friction. So again, like I said, I'm happy to send this deck because I'm trying to do this in a compressed way, but I'm happy to send this deck to anyone. Okay, so choke points, what I meant by choke points is these are scarcities. These are either capabilities or assets or positions in the chain where that control the flow of value. So if you think about something like search emerged as a new complement, a new business when information exploded on the internet, a new way to help people find stuff. It was not initially a choke point. Initially, it was competitive. You had, Alta Vista and Lycos and Ask Jeeves and Go and Yahoo, whatever. It became a choke point when Google consolidated control of it, right? And so when you say, well, what are going to be the choke points? What are the scarcities in the media business? I have a whole long list here, and some of the things that I think are maybe relevant for you is, the idea of human provenance. I think backstory, process, motivation, I think that's going to get more, that will be more valuable than ever. I think trust and authenticity, right? That's going to be more valuable than ever. Curation doesn't only mean algorithmic curation, it means taste. It means editorial curation will be more important than ever. Community will be more important. The IP itself will be more important. So these are all things where I think value will shift. And the point of this slide is that different players in the value chain are more naturally owners of these different things. And so our last slide. So I think this is the bottom line, is that the business is going to get more competitive. We're going to have more content competing for a finite amount of demand. It will get more complex, but I think there are going to be opportunities for the people and the enterprises that position themselves correctly. And how do you do that? I think, number one, you educate yourself, as you guys are today. You experiment, and I think you lean into what's scarce. And with that, I will stop. All right. Well, thank you.